Okay, we're going with 5 takeaways. We didn't power rank them or anything. These are from the 162 Major League Baseball games that we saw all 30 teams play. And they're not necessarily individually focused. They could be. These are trends. These are observations that we had, and these are what we are going to take away whenever the final out of the World Series happens. We go to bed, we wake up the next day, and when we reminisce on the 2021 MLB season, this is what we're thinking about in regards to the regular season. We've each got 5. Pete, you go first.
I guess, we're not doing top 5, but just a takeaway I had. The youth explosion in baseball has been incredible this year. 3 of the top 4 players in WRC Plus are all 22 years old or younger. That's Juan Soto, that's Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and that's Fernando Tatis Jr. Ronald Acuna Jr. is 23 years old and was on his way to having a similar type season. Rafael Devers, we mentioned him, is 24 and is one of the best young bats in all of baseball. Julio Urias is the Bigs' only 20-game winner at just 24. Brian Hayes led all third basemen in outs above average and defensive runs saved, and he's just 24. Kyle Tucker put up a top 10 offensive season, and he's just 24. And I got to end it with Wander Franco is still just 20 years old and looks like a top 10 shortstop. The future is so bright for the game of baseball.
Aram, you next.
My big thing, there's a few. I honestly don't even know which one I want to start with, but I want to start because this was something we really talked about a lot in the staff chat. But what I have written down is sometimes we can't explain things, and that's okay. And as that really pertains to the Mariners, right? Because we look at the Mariners and everyone's asking me, how are the Mariners doing this? How are the Mariners doing this? I don't know. Sometimes I have no idea. I dove at the numbers.
I don't know.
They saw a lot of pitches per at bat. They're grinders. People were like, oh yeah, they come through in the clutch. Sure. But they were the lowest batting average team with runners in scoring position. You can't really explain it. Just because we can't explain it does not mean that it's invalidated. I think there's an important line to draw here in a world where we want to be able to explain everything. It's human nature. We want to know why, how did this happen? Sometimes it's inexplainable. And I think that's an example. It happens all the time in baseball. For example, Brandon Crawford, I have no freaking clue. Like, you look at his numbers, nothing has changed. His batted ball data is not that much different. Like, there's not that much. His chase rates aren't different. Nothing has changed. He's just, something worked for him. For the Mariners, they just won games. So yes, is it a little bit weird that they won this many games? Yeah, maybe they won't do it next year. But I want to make it clear that in baseball, in a world where we always want to be able to explain things, it's okay to not be able to explain things and still say that Mariners team was what was it, 89 wins they finished with? Yeah. They're an 89 win team. And just because we can't explain it doesn't mean they're any less of an 89 win team. This isn't Barry Bonds taking steroids, right? Like, where you put an asterisk next to it. Just because we can't explain it, there's no asterisk next to the 89 wins because their team FIP and their team WAR and their team other all these stats that are very important and indicative of winning don't match up. Sometimes teams just win, and the Mariners won, and they didn't quite make it. But that's just my one example. I think there's a lot of different ways in baseball where we see that manifest itself.
That was very poetic.
Thank you.
That was. Congratulations, Aram. Kind of marrying your two, where you've got this youth movement and some things just cannot be explained. You can't count vets out either. And I know that we're seeing this youth movement, but San Francisco with Posey, Crawford, Belt. How about Yadi Molina and Adam Wainwright in St. Louis? How about Max Scherzer still doing what he's doing with LA? How about Sal Perez with 48 bombs and north of 110 runs driven in? Wade Miley having a great year and throwing a no-hitter. Young talent has rightfully taken over the game. But there's something about a 30-something that's been there, and they're studs.
And Jack, my fourth takeaway is basically just to piggyback on that. And it's also kind of the opposite of the youth explosion, is that you don't have to be young to win. The best record in baseball in 2021 is held by the San Francisco Giants at 107-55. The oldest group of position players in 2021, the San Francisco Giants. The average age is 30.6 years old. 14 Giants have gotten at least 250 plate appearances this season. 12 of them are in their 30s. And their 5 most productive offensive players, you named it, Brandon Belt, Brandon Crawford, Buster Posey, Evan Longoria, and Darren Ruff, are all 33 years or older. I mean, you got to give Gabe Kapler a ton of credit here. He did a great job playing the right matchups and just managing their workloads effectively. And San Francisco Giants, man, they killed it.
They kept everyone fresh. I think that's a really good point. I think if they were playing day in and day out, they would have ran into a wall.
Absolutely.
And they weren't playing day in and day out. They played a lot, but they were able to manage things really well. I am sure they had some comprehensive breakdown of the best way to offset everybody's off days. I'm sure it was some insane crap. It wasn't just like, oh, you need a day off today, you're off. I think it was probably some crazy chart of like, oh, when Posey's off, this guy's off, but this guy's on. Like, I don't even want to know what Farhan Zaidi put on over there, but it worked. Absolutely awesome. Love the Giants. My other takeaway is that two-way players are a detriment to your team. Look at what happened with Shohei Ohtani and the Angels. Look at what happened with the Marlins and Sandy Leone. Made 6 appearances. It didn't work. No, but actually my real takeaway is that patience is a virtue and that ceilings are limitless. And this is a 2-for-1 because a few things I want to point out here, especially when we had a shortened 2020 where we didn't really get to see a whole season play out. How many guys that previously kind of sucked and that were former top prospects that we were out on and then just blew up this year, or guys that weren't even top prospects and just put it together this year and we're like, whoa, where did this guy come from? So many dudes. And we look at like the WAR leaders. I mean, guys in the top 30, like Brian Reynolds, somebody that, nobody was really paying attention to after he was traded over from the Astros, just didn't really have that much going. He was putting up numbers, but not quite to the degree. Tyler O'Neill was terrible through his first few stints in the big leagues, puts it together this year. How about like guys, for example, Cedric Mullins? He just stopped switch hitting and all of a sudden he's incredible. I think that's something we were so quick to be out on prospects. Austin Riley. He was pretty bad last year. The year before that, he was shaky. Now he was one of the better hitters in the game this year. I think it's really important to look at those things, right? Like there's guys, baseball is a sport where it's really hard to get acclimated and to get comfortable. And sometimes it takes a while. How about JP Crawford, former top prospect? The tools are there. There's guys that are top prospects for a reason. The tools are there, but sometimes they can't make those tools work. Sometimes it just takes some time. And JP Crawford made it happen. The other thing I hate is ceilings. Can we stop pretending like we know the limitations of individual humans? Like that is the most aggravating thing to me. What do you think, Rob? What would you have said Robbie Ray's ceiling was 2 years ago?
It's a great point. Yeah, I don't know.
We would have said middle of the rotation, best case. He's an ace. What would you have said, even like a Cedric Mullins when he was even doing kind of well? What's his ceiling? What's Nestor Cortez's ceiling?
Best
we would have said middle reliever, right? Swing man.
Yeah.
Instead, was a legitimate starter. Ranger Suarez. What's his ceiling? Let's go to Fangraphs. Fangraphs would say back at or bottom of the barrel bullpen arm, right? Why are we putting limitations on humans that can change things so fluidly and rapidly? That's something that goes into the prospects bucket, but also the big league bucket. Like, I think you can say this is the most likely scenario if things work for him, but I'm so tired of saying like this guy will never be better than this. Like, I think we're smarter than that. And I think that's something that needs to be made true in baseball now. What was Brian Reynolds' ceiling? It was not perennial all-star, because right now Brian Reynolds is looking like a top 20 player in the game.
Yeah.
Nobody had that as his 1000th percentile outcome. And that's something to me. It's like baseball is so, you can't just predict it on athleticism like football or basketball. Like there's so many factors, and let's stop putting ceilings on guys, please. Well, don't relegate them to the bullpen. Don't relegate them to fourth outfielder. Stop it. That's just enough.
This is the perfect segue here, because I'm going to bridge right into athletic freaks, and then Pete's going to talk about the biggest freak of them all. Here's my other takeaway here. You say we can't put a ceiling on human ability. I say we have no idea what the capability of human ability is. There is no ceiling there. We don't know what people can do as human beings. If you're not a freak, you don't have a shot. I was just texting the Just Baseball group yesterday, but the Nats in game 162 ran out Patrick Murphy. Who the hell is Patrick Murphy? It turns out he's 6'5", he throws 99, and he has a hammer of a 12-6 breaking ball. You know, I was told, you were told, Pete, you were told that hard work and a can-do attitude can get you there. I just don't think that's the case anymore. I think these guys are exceptional human beings. They are built different, with the purple devil emoji and then the emoji with the air shooting out of each nostril.
Is Nestor Cortez a freak?
Yes.
Kind of.
Is Ranger Suarez a freak?
They are freaks. Their body control, what they're able to do with their 5'10", 200-pound frames, they are a freak. Both of them are athletic freaks. They may not look like it, but they are.
Bartolo was an athletic freak.
Freaks. You can't just do that. No, God, there are millions of people who look like Nestor Cortez and Ranger Suarez. There are two people who can do what they do, and their names are Nestor Cortez and Ranger Suarez.
I think I think that Jack, there's a lot of what he is saying. There's merit to it, but I do think that there's a level of you can just like learn this. I think that if you have a baseline, like Nestor Cortez threw low 80s in high school, senior year of high school through low 80s, and then just started to get to like the upper 80s. And I just think like, what is he elite at? Controlling his body. You can teach that. That's not freakish to me. Controlling your body isn't freakish. That's the learned.
Okay, but you and I know damn well that 90 is really fucking hard to get to. And with that type of body control, with those type of secondary offerings, to build to 90 and still maintain all that and have the body control, that is cut out for a select few human beings on earth. And they all play Major League Baseball.
Let's talk about the one human in baseball that can't be replicated and, in my opinion, had the greatest season in MLB history. Not the most impressive, not the best of 2021, the greatest season of all time. Let's go over his hitting ranks in the MLB this year. WRC plus, 5th. Home runs, 3rd. Stolen bases. He had 26 goddamn stolen bases.
So stupid.
He finished 8th in baseball, 5th in OPS. How about pitching with a minimum of 130 innings? He was 23rd in ERA, 26th in FIP, 9th in strikeouts per 9, 9th, and 9th in opponent batting average against. And now let's get into some of the crazier stats I saw this year. Talk about a clutch gene. Ohtani leads AL hitters with a 468 on-base percentage, a 686 slugging, and a 1.154 OPS with runners in scoring position. He also leads AL pitchers with a 122 opponent batting average with runners in scoring position. Oh my freaking God. Opponents just hit 087 off of his splitter. That's the lowest batting average for any pitch in baseball. And he's one of 4 pitchers to reach 100 miles an hour with 11 pitches this season. So he throws 100 and he has one of the nastiest breaking balls in all of baseball. He's the first player to have 10 home runs as a hitter and 100 plus strikeouts as a pitcher in the same season. He's the first with 20 stolen bases and 10 plus pitching appearances. He hit for himself in 20 of 23 starts. And on April 4th, probably the greatest game. I don't know how to describe it, because on April 4th, he threw 3 pitches over 100 miles an hour, and he had a 451-foot home run that left the bat at 115 miles an hour. Now, we're talking greatest season of all time, right? Barry Bonds in 2002 hit 73 home runs while hitting 328 and had a 235 WRC plus. I ask you, what was his ERA?
0.
Bob Gibson in 1968 had a 1.12 ERA over 34 starts and a 1.67 ERA in the World Series through 3 starts, and he struck out 35 hitters. He won the Cy Young that year, and he won the MVP. I ask you what his batting average was. I don't know what else to say. It's almost to me like you're taking, okay, let's say a quarterback threw 40 touchdowns and on the other side has 7 sacks and 8 interceptions versus a guy who had 55 touchdowns thrown, or Lawrence Taylor with 20 sacks, or Darrell Revis with 20 interceptions. I don't know if those are the correct numbers, but it's like, yes, they had better individual seasons in those categories. Nobody in history has done it all. Shohei Ohtani had the greatest season in MLB history, and I'm obsessed with the man.
Can I say one thing? Bob Gibson, by the way, hit 303 in 1970.
That's kind of insane.
Yeah, I know. It was just that year, though.
Not that same year, though. Not that same year.
No. But that I just had to throw that out there because I wanted to.
In how many at bats? Come on, let's not fuck with me.
No, I know. No, he honestly was his only insane offensive year. I mean, for a pitcher, he was great. 206, 243, 301 slash line on the career, pretty solid. But for whatever reason, 1970, you was seeing beach balls, 33 hits and 124 plate appearances. But in his MVP season, hit 170, so point stands. But I just thought that was kind of cool. Yeah. So I have my last takeaway.
Wait, before we get into it, what do you guys think he had the greatest season of all time?
Yes.
I think when you break glass ceilings, when you set, like I think that this year is going to be looked at in the future as like one of the first players to break through, and what I think may be done, not often, but it's going to be done. I think it's going to be replicated in some facets. I said this before when we were talking, walking down the street, Peter. I was like, I wonder how many players were capable, not to Ohtani's level, but were capable of bringing value, pitching and hitting, that, people just said, nah, he can't do it. I mean, people were saying, nah, Ohtani can't do it. And people were still saying it like 2 months ago. So it's like, I wonder how many people were pushed out of doing that.
Okay, Aram, you and I have talked about it on this podcast. It's not Hunter Green. He's not the next one. It's not Brendan McKay. The next guy to provide value on both sides, I think, is in the Cardinals system. Mason Wynn can be a bullpen arm that throws 100 miles an hour. He is also a really good shortstop that can hit 20 home runs. I think Mason Wynn is the next guy to provide value on both sides of baseball.
And he's a freak athlete. So like what Peter was talking about with the stolen bases and stuff, like he can do that. I'm with you. I think that like now you look at a Mason Wynn and you're like, maybe we'll let him keep doing both a little bit. I think Wynn, like we were saying, is more of a bullpen guy, but that's probably better anyways. I mean, not everybody has the physical capacity to do what Ohtani can do because he's so big. But yeah, I think because of that, he's a pioneer. I think he's going to change the way we look at some of these freak athletes and allow them to do more. So for that reason, historically too, to me, it is the best season ever.
My next takeaway is that we're fully enveloped by a new era of starting pitching. Corbin Burns is out here throwing 98-mile-an-hour backdoor cutters. Zach Wheeler, Brandon Woodruff, Garrett Cole, Walker Buehler. How about Sandy Alcantara, Aram, your guy? Frankie Montas, Peter, your guy. They're all sitting like 97 miles an hour. If you're not 97, kind of speaking to the freak thing, you're 94 with a wipeout slider, a disgusting splitter, or a Wainwright-esque curveball, or you are an outlier and you're so freaking good at it, like Ranger Suarez or Nestor Cortez. Starting pitching is entirely different now than it was 5 years ago. And a guy like Kyle Hendricks, yes, he was among the win leaders. The guy got hit around the ballpark all the time.
All the time.
If you are not purely disgusting, you're out. You're totally phased out of this game.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair.
Sucks.
But what I do like, though, is that you still do have these Ranger Suarez's breaking through, and you still do have some of these guys breaking through. I do think that there's a level of emphasis on a new wave of pitchability that we're seeing from like the Logan Webbs and the Kevin Gossmans in San Francisco, because San Francisco goes with some low spin guys. Like they have a whole different philosophy. I think it's always changing as we see the Reds part ways.
94 too, like Kevin
Gossman,
94 Webb, 94 sinkers. I know it's just I know it's still the new, but if you said that 5 years ago that some guys throwing 94-mile-an-hour sinkers and you're like, yeah, he's a pitchability guy. He's more relies on command. You'd be like, what the hell?
Yeah. But even like Chris Flexen, like how many strikeouts per nine do you think Chris Flexen's averaging?
7.
Jack?
6.
6.26.
Nice. I win.
You win.
But he works. His FIP's not bad. His ERA is good. Like he's solid. Top 30 pitcher in WAR. Like so, I do agree 100%. But I do still have the level of belief that there's those guys that could still break through. But
I agree.
Like Jack said, you got to be damn good. You got to be damn good, and you got to locate, and you got to be close to. Like Greg Maddux would dominate today, right? Like you got to be a freak show though. And we got some freak shows there on both sides of it, of like athleticism wise and command wise. Pete, was it you or me for the next one?
It's you.
Awesome. So my next one is, can we stop punching inanimate objects? You're never going to win that. And I look at the postseason picture here, and it's heavily affected. Devin Williams, obviously, you guys have talked about this. I was pissed because I really wanted to go on this, but I was really happy you guys got to it, and I enjoyed hearing the breakdown. But how about Huascar Ynoa? Huascar Ynoa was rolling and looking like a legitimate front of the rotation type of option. I think he would have slowed down naturally a little bit too. Still needs to find that third pitch, blah, blah, blah. But he has not had enough time to get going again since returning from his hand being broken because he lost a fight with the bench. Now he's not going to be the game 3 pitcher. It's going to be Ian Anderson who pitches game 3. He might have pitched game 3 anyways, but you have much less confidence in Huascar Ynoa if you're the Braves, because since he's come back, he hasn't fully recaptured that form. That's 2 big arms in this postseason that have punched inanimate objects and it affected them. I'm not going to get into the punching other humans thing because that's also really affected this playoff picture. And that's also really messed up. And that's a problem across many sports. But baseball has a weird punching objects problem too. And take some notes, guys. You're not winning. Like, I don't know who, like when you see the wall and you're ready to swing, what do you think is going to happen? You think you're going to be the first dude to ever punch through a brick wall? First dude to ever destroy through a dugout bench? That's all I got on that one.
The wall never wins.
Always wins.
The wall always wins. And speaking about,
people were listening right now, ready to like go wail on.
Yeah, the wall never wins. The wall always
Peter, you made
wins.
me break my hand.
It's not punching advice.
It's not punching advice. And talking more about injuries, the difference, my next takeaway, the difference between 60 and 162 games is a lot. Injuries hurt a lot of stars in baseball this year. These guys didn't punch walls, but they still got injured. Jacob deGrom, Mike Trout, Shane Bieber, Ron Acuna Jr., Anthony Rendon, Dustin May, Kenta Maeda is now out for the year. Luke Voigt has been dealing with injuries all year. Tyler Glasnow with the elbow injury. Steven Strasburg barely pitched. And I can go way longer.
Yeah, we could do a 2-hour episode on that.
Seriously could. I'm not even counting players who landed on the COVID-19 IL this year. The number of player placements on injured lists around baseball was up by about 37% compared with each of the previous 2 full seasons, 2019 and 2018. Reoccurring injuries were also an enormous issue. Heading into the final weekend of the season, there was 216 different players that made multiple visits to the non-COVID-19 IL this season. In the last full season, back in 2019, it was just 131, so almost doubled. 848 pitchers made an appearance this year. 646 made an appearance in the 2011 season. So almost 200 more pitchers per season since 2011. A lot of injuries hurt a lot of the big stars in today's game.
Soft tissue, obliques, right? Hammies, quads, nagging things. It's what happens when you try and ramp up from 0 to 100 or 60 to 162.
Just sucks. Looking back at really all the injuries, all the guys who we could have seen, Ronald Acuna, what would the Nationals have been if Steven Strasburg was at his healthiest? I mean, we're talking about the Mets and DeGrom, the Angels and Shohei. What if Trout was there? I mean, Shane Bieber, Indians were at least fighting. If Bieber's there the whole year, is there another story? A lot of teams didn't get their full due because their stars were out.
Yeah, two quick thoughts on that. That's something I talked about early in the year with Jeff Conine, on Outside the Box. And he said, you really don't realize, like, most of these guys that have been in the league for several years now, like, they have their system. And going from the 60 to 162, I think the biggest effect too, and this was something I talked about with Anthony Rizzo, and it was really cool to get his thoughts on this, because when I had spoken to him, he didn't know when they were reporting yet. And he's like, man, like, we got to know soon, because I have my whole system. Like, I start usually this many days out and I do this, and then I get into this, and then I get into this, and every player is different. but he was saying like, man, this could be ugly this year because everybody has their system and their bodies are acclimated to that. I've been doing this for more than a decade now. Like my body only knows this. Fortunately, Rizzo didn't really get hurt or anything severely, but a lot of players did. And Rizzo was spot on. And it was funny circling back with Jeff a few months later, said the same thing. And I think that's part of it was a little bit of the indecision from Major League, which is an understandable indecision. Then we didn't know what was going on in the world, but that indecision of like when we were going to start spring training and then get into things, it really set players up in a weird spot. And unfortunately, really, hopefully we'll go back to next year and injuries will kind of temper back down a little bit. I mean, that's the hope.
Yeah, we're already taking too much of people's time on wild card days. So I've got two more. We each have one more after that. We'll do rapid fire finish here. My second to last takeaway is there's almost a direct correlation between spending money and winning baseball games. And that has been the idea forever. And that only reigns more true this year. There are some outliers like Tampa and Milwaukee on the positive end, but for the most part, the higher the payroll, the more wins you will accrue. Unless your last name is Neander or Stearns, there is no outsmarting the system. Those guys are just smarter than everybody else. And if you want to visually palette this, Danny Vietti, who's a producer for CBS Sports, put out a great scatter plot yesterday. I mean, it is linear, a linear correlation between spending money and winning baseball games. So you look at Baltimore, you look at other teams on the low end of that spectrum, they're not winning.
Say it, Jack.
They don't. What?
Say it. Marlins, say it. I know
Marlins.
You want to.
Yeah. The Marlins are not winning because they don't spend money, Aram. There you go.
I didn't know that. It's only 15 years of misery. Maybe more, actually.
That's my big takeaway. All right. Aram, you're next. And then after that, we roll.
Defense wins championships. That to me, I think, it's kind of a lost aspect of the game. And I think we've really seen how much it matters and how much it can be a difference maker for teams. You're not going to be able to answer everything all the time. And especially if you have some inconsistent pitching, like the Cardinals. I was looking at the Cardinals, like how are they staying in ball games? How are they making all of this work? Well above the league average in outs above average and well above, or actually way ahead in first place. They're 8 defensive run saves. I believe last time I checked, I think it's now 12 by the end of the season, ahead of the next most in baseball. When it comes to outs above average, 53 outs above average. The next most was the Astros at 41. So 12 outs above average better. So that's a way you compensate for, a mediocre pitching staff, really, which is what the Cardinals had. Astros, same thing. Their pitching is not that great, especially in the bullpen, relatively average, maybe below average, but they get outs because not a lot of balls fly in the outfield and they don't give you a second chance. You look at the top 5 or 6 teams in outs above average. The Rangers are in there at 3. They just suck. So it's fine. But you get the Rays at 4 and the Giants at 6. Those are all teams that were consistently good this year. And the Giants, they were great pitching wise. But you look overall, these are teams that, didn't absolutely dominate on the pitching side and were able to save a lot of runs with their defense. And I think that's something that, has been lost in baseball a little bit. And the teams that are doing well, despite not having as much star power, are the ones that are defending well.
I love that you mentioned that because that was a big downfall of the Phillies. I mean, the Phillies are terrible defensively. Ergo, they're not that good. They're just not that talented, but they've really had the problem defensively. My last takeaway is that nobody's putting the ball in play anymore. Yuli Gurriel won the batting title in the American League at 319, but it was the lowest since Tony Gwynn won it, hit 313 in 1988. I mean, Justin Morneau won it in 2014, and Terry Pendleton won it in 1991, also hitting 319. But the league batting average this year was 244. That's the lowest since 1968. The average team hit 5.1 singles per game. That's the fewest total number of singles in a full season. Due to this, we saw overlapping effects in other instances in baseball. We saw the lowest rate of double plays. We saw the lowest rate of stolen bases since 1967. Batting average on balls in play was the lowest since 1922 because everyone's hitting the ball in the air. And we also had a lowest in the past decade of average numbers of errors per game. Not to say that everyone's getting better defensively. It's just the ball is simply not being put in play. I mean, a lot of this can be attributed to shifting, and overall, nobody is putting the ball in play. Not a single player had 200 hits this season. Trey Turner led all of baseball with 195 hits. Nobody cares about putting the ball on the ground. Everyone hates Tim Anderson and his high BABIP.
Yeah, everybody hates it. Here's my final takeaway, because we bitch about this sport all the time. 3 times a week, we tell you exactly what's wrong with this sport. This is the best damn sport in the world. No other professional sporting environment allows a city or a fan base to ride this romantic, emotional high on the sport alone, like what baseball just did for St. Louis over the last couple of weeks, or Seattle for the last week and a half, or Boston with that Devers homer. Or how about Chicago, my White Sox fan base with the Tim Anderson home run in Dyersville, Iowa. You cannot beat the full visceral investment into baseball, and I cannot fucking wait for this postseason to get rolling tonight. Red Sox, Yankees in a wild card game. Jesus Christ.
And you can follow us on YouTube, and you can watch our full podcast episode at Just Baseball Media. Be sure to go give us a follow on TikTok and Instagram at Just Baseball Fans. Go give us a follow on Twitter at Just BB Media. That's Aram Layton 8 on Twitter. That's Jack_McMullen 11. And I am at Peter Apple 23. We will be typing along in the Discord, giving you all of our information. So feel free to go join our Discord. Twitch.tv/justbaseballfans. Catch us on Wednesdays and Fridays at 1:30 p.m. Eastern, playing MLB The Show and going over all of the playoff games. Gentlemen, anything else before we bid our listeners adieu?
11 followers to 1,000 on Twitter. Help us get there. I'm going to be doing a giveaway, giving away a Dalton Varsho autographed rookie card on there. So keep an eye out for that.
All 3 of us have the Yankees to win the AL wild card, NL wild card. Those 2 have the Dodgers. I've got the Cardinals.
I don't know if I have the Dodgers. I don't know. I haven't made my pick yet. You'll see it on Wednesday's Not Gambling Advice episode.
Okay. All right. Pete.
Thank you, everybody.